gave up a TV job to start a podcast in your basement. If that doesn't scream midlife crisis, I don't know what does.
It was Championship Sunday here in Indianapolis. What's the mindset then coming in as a defending champion?
I want to win. No, I want to win.
The young lady over my shoulder, Caitlin Clark.
Not the best looking guy. And I don't think anyone's going to sit here and say, Matt Randazzo was really good looking.
What has this last month, 2 months, 3 months been like for you? It's an important fan base for the Fighting Illini, is it not?
It is.
He turned 69 years young last week. You look good, Coach.
Oh, try it. Thank you.
Welcome to Off the Air on a Friday here in the Quad Cities. Thank you so much for joining us. We have officially made it through another week. Hopefully everyone is ready for the weekend. Excited for some great football coming up. It's Conference Championship Sunday, so much to get to this weekend. A lot to get to once again on today's show. It was a tough night last night for the Fighting Illini down in Champaign. A surprising loss to Maryland. Maybe not the fact they lost, but maybe the way they did it. So we'll break that down with Jim Mattson coming up in just a few minutes. Also excited on today's show because a good friend of mine joins me, a former Super Bowl champion. There's not a lot of those from the Quad Cities. One of them is Jake Gervase. He will join me, kind of talk about the NFC and AFC championship games. We'll also talk about the NIL era, Iowa football, and a whole bunch more. So super excited to have Jake Gervase join us in just a little bit. And also, we want to make you some money this weekend. So our weekly gambling segment has Dan Tomlin back talking about our success last week, and then also 4 new plays for you to get to this week as well. So excited for a jam-packed show once again today. Also, make sure you are watching on YouTube. If you are watching, make sure you subscribe. We are finally up over 600 subscribers. Super excited about that, but now I'm going to have to move the goalpost. I'm looking for 700 now. So if you are subscribing, thank you so much. If you have not, please do so. Also tell a friend or 2 or 10 this weekend to kind of help us grow this thing that we're doing right here in the Quad Cities. We're also up on all of our podcasting platforms. That includes Apple Podcasts. So if you want to listen to this, if you don't want to look at my ugly face, and I totally understand that, and you simply want to listen, you can do that on all the podcasting platforms as well. It's been a great week of shows. If you missed yesterday's show, Owen Freeman from the Iowa basketball team joined us. So that's a very relevant interview to listen to today or this evening. Of course, Iowa in action tonight, trying to snap a 3-game losing streak. So Owen Freeman on yesterday's show, also Alex Johnson and Jake Brand. So check that out. And if you missed any of the shows this week, Dan Burge was on earlier. Mark Nessler was on. Sean Taylor was on. Rob Brooks was on. So a lot of great guests this week. So go check out the shows from the previous day and days right here on Off the Air with Matt Randazzo. Well, we mentioned at the top of the show, it was a tough night last night in Champaign. The Fighting Illini falling at home to Maryland, and not just losing, but losing by double figures. It really wasn't close, maybe the last 10 minutes of the game or so. So we are going to break that down, and a good friend of mine is here to do that with me, the one and only Jim Mattson. I call you a sportscasting legend in the state of Illinois. I know you don't like it when I get carried away, but there's not too many people that are more locked into Illini athletics, well, athletics in general in the state of Illinois, but Illini athletics than you. So I guess, Jim, we'll start with last night, and I don't think I expected that. I expected a close game. Maryland's a good basketball team, but just the way it all went down was a little surprising. What did you see?
Yeah, I think shocking. I think I was scared of Maryland. I think Maryland's really good. I think they've lost 4 games on the road by a combined 16 points. They've been in every game against every team, and they've got an NBA lottery pick in Queen. They got just a phenomenal player, Julian Reese, and the other thing is they've got Underwood's number. Brad Underwood is now 3-8 against Maryland, so I'm not sure what the secret potion is there, but I know Brad doesn't know the secret potion because he can't beat Maryland. But I thought coming off the loss to Michigan State, Illinois would be mad and ready to go, and they weren't. I mean, they trailed nearly the entire game. I think 11-10 was their last lead. Like you said, they wind up losing by 20. I think it's one of the 20th worst losses in Illinois home basketball history. I mean, they just don't get thumped at home very often. So very disappointing. They played without Ivisic, and Ivisic is kind of, a little bit of their Steph Curry. He moves all the chess pieces. His shooting range is a big, stretches defenses, allows, KJ to have more room. So that was a big, guy missing in the lineup, but still 91-70. I mean, I don't care how many starters you're missing. That doesn't happen very often in Illinois basketball.
You watched that game last night, and Jim, you just saw the points in the paint for Maryland were astounding. And I don't joked a little bit, but when we got on this call, it looked like men against boys, and you don't expect that, especially the way this Illinois basketball team's been playing. Kind of talk about that, because dominated in the paint, and that sends a message to the rest of the Big Ten about what Maryland can do. Like you mentioned, a lottery pick inside, but a little concerning, I know, without Tommy, but a little concerning in the paint.
Yeah, the paint points are just absolutely amazing in the game. Was it a 62-34? Maryland scored 62 points in the paint. They didn't have a three-pointer almost all night. They wound up, I think, with 3 3-pointers. So it was just old-fashioned basketball. They got points on the fast break. They had 27 points off turnovers. So, 27 points when Illinois didn't set up their defense is, a little bit alarming. But I keep looking at this Illinois team, and, I'm still an eyeball guy quite a bit. The metrics say greatness. The metrics say Illinois is one of the few teams in the country that's top 20 offense and defense in Ken Pom rankings. Normally if you're a top 20 offense and defense, you're a Final Four team. You're a team that is projected to go very far in the tournament. And certainly when this Illinois team is on, the Oregon game, the Indiana game, probably aren't many teams in the country that are going to beat them. But they've had some thunker. They've had some bad games. They had the USC game. They blew a 10-point lead against Northwestern. They had this game. The maturity of this team, we're in a world where, like, instant coffee, we want instant Final Four. This is a new team. This is not D and Darren and Luther that, the freshman year that they didn't win the Big Ten. Sophomore year, they get to the Sweet 16. Junior year, they get to the Final Four. I mean, we're asking this team to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 4 months. And that's sometimes doesn't happen. That's why I keep saying, Underwood keeps talking about the potential of this team. But can they get that potential in March? That's asking a lot.
Yeah, I think the ceiling is really high on this team and
really
what it could be, but it's almost the floor is lower than I think last year, because you knew the pieces, you knew what you had, you knew where you were going to get, but you didn't know if you could get to that next level. This team has the talent to do that. Sickness for Tommy, concern. I know he was in the house, and a quick turn, because a Thursday night game, I guess not super quick, but they play again on Sunday, early on Sunday. So thoughts and expectations on him getting back?
Well, Underwood's not being too forthcoming with, health issues. He was in the building. I mean, he couldn't have been on his deathbed if he's in the building. So I would think he's leaning towards playing Sunday. They're going to need him Sunday. Northwestern is a physical team too. I mean, Northwestern's going to try to pound him in the paint. You're right. The recipe out there to beat Illinois is out there now. 7 turnovers by KJ, 5 turnovers by Boswell. Pressure the ball, try to get some easy buckets, but then pound the paint. And they're going to need Tommy in that game coming up on Sunday for sure. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, there's illness everywhere. I know there's all kinds of people sick here in Central Illinois. So you hope it doesn't get to some more of the Illini players. But again, the fact that he was in the building to me was odd. You would think if he was ruled out because of illness, he wouldn't have even been there.
Where is this fan base after that loss? Because I know you deal with fans, and fan is short for fanatic. I mean, the sky is falling in Iowa City right now. They've lost 3 straight. I think this is 3 of 4. Now, against very good, and you knew it was going to be a tough stretch going to the places they went to, but 2 losses at home doesn't happen very often. Where's the fan base, the fanatics, when it comes to where this Illinois basketball team is and where it can get to?
Well, again, I think the key word there is fanatics. I mean, you ride the roller coaster. When they beat Oregon, everyone's thinking Final Four, booking their flights to San Antonio. When they lose yesterday, everyone's questioning Underwood. The one thing I would say is injuries is a huge factor, and guys missing is a huge factor. The 2005 Illini, Bruce Weber's national runner-up team, same starting lineup every single game. Yeah. That doesn't happen. The 89 Illini, the best team I ever covered, the 89 Illini, when Kendallville got hurt, Illinois lost some games. It's hard to win without KJ. They lost without KJ. It's hard to win without Tommy last night. It's hard because you're adjusting on the fly. You're changing. It's very difficult to get ready in those situations. So I always say, I mean, every game somebody's going to win. Maryland's a good team. Yeah. They're going to win. I mean, you don't like losing by 21, but fans, I think, have to realize again that This is not 3 years of culture being built and Dee and Darren and Luther refusing to lose. This is kids that, many of them a year ago were in Europe. Riley's in Canada. I mean, it's a very young team. Jake Davis is at Mercer. I mean, Drake Gibbs Longhorn's the only guy back.
Yeah.
So the instant culture and the instant defiance that we saw from some of the great Illinois teams and the great Iowa teams, the great teams that are built over years, that doesn't happen anymore. And that's really tough on a coach, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and also looking forward with that, missing games like this if they've played together for a year and a half, 2 years already.
Absolutely.
But these guys are still a work in progress, so obviously it helps on the floor that night against Maryland, but these are missed opportunities. It feels like you got to it's speed dating. We kind of talked about that. You have to figure it out, get chemistry, connect, because this roster will probably look a lot different next year. So moving forward, these are games. You want to get these guys healthy and playing as much basketball as possible in the end of January and February, because things are quickly moving towards that March Madness type of year.
Yeah, and the things you can control. I mean, you got to get rid of the bad turnovers. You can't allow 27 fast break points. Again, if Illinois legitimately is a top 20 ranked defense, well, fast break points, your defense is never set up. You can't give up 27 fast break points off of sloppy turnovers by your primary ball handlers, Boswell and KJ. They can't do that. For Illinois to be special, they've got to take care. I mean, it's the old basics: take care of the ball, rebound, and shoot. And the other thing, shooting. They're 6 out of 28 on threes yesterday. They're 5 out of 24 on threes against Michigan State. They're 7 out of 32 on threes against USC. Now, Underwood said, he recruited this team for positional length and three-point shooting. And right now, the three-point shooting has been very hit or miss. And, boy, when they miss a lot and they lose games.
Jim, you look at this team, and I kind of joked with another Illini buddy the other day that it's like Brad Underwood is continuing to open Christmas gifts throughout the season, because you forget about guys that are on the roster. I mean, a Kerry Booth, when he transfers from Notre Dame to Illinois, there's a ton of excitement about a young, talented player that could make an impact. And then we hadn't seen him. And that's just, you almost forgot about Will Riley, so good early. And then the other night he's like, oh, I want to play with this toy again. And I know it's not what he's doing, but I think it just speaks to the depth of that roster and how to put it all together so quickly. I mean, you got talented guys. Kerry Booth is going to play a lot of basketball, maybe at Illinois, but he'd be playing a lot somewhere else as well. Talk about the depth of this roster that Brad Underwood has.
Well, the depth piece is there, but I go back to your earlier point about who can you count on. Will Riley has nearly 20 at Michigan State. I don't think he scores yesterday. Now, he's been battling sickness, but he was on the court for 17 minutes and didn't score. That's that up and down of the youth, and that's that up. Will Riley's going to be in the NBA. He is a incredible scorer, but he's a young kid. And again, I keep going back to the potential. Can they get there? And we've seen a lot of Kentucky teams with lottery picks and first round draft picks that bounce in the first round or second round of the tournament. It's hard to have 17, 18-year-olds grow up, especially now with 23 and 24-year-olds out there. I just don't know if they can get there. But you're right, the depth, all the puzzle pieces that Underwood's trying to put together, you almost forget about Kerry Booth. In fact, the last home game I was at, I was kind of looking at the end of the bench, and I was like, wow, that's Kerry Booth at the end of the bench. Who you're right, we were pretty excited when he announced he was coming from Notre Dame. He played a lot at Notre Dame last year and barely playing at all. But Underwood is still, January 24th, Underwood is still trying to figure out the pieces. Trey White's been in a little bit of a slump. Boswell's turning the ball over. Ivisic has been a little bit up and down. KJ's been good when he gets a chance to play. He wasn't real good last night, but who can you count on every night? The great Illinois teams. You could count on D. You could count on Darren. You could count on Luther. Augustine was going to get your rebounds. Those are, Kenny Battle was going to score. Nick Anderson was going to score. Who can you count on? If you only got one or two guys you can count on, you're probably not a great team. And right now, Illinois' got to find 3 or 4 guys that every night, Underwood's saying, everyday guys. Who's an everyday guy right now?
Yeah, you mentioned it, and we kind of joke with Iowa that, Fran plays 8, probably trusts 6, maybe 5. And that's kind of the way, Brad's got to be a little bit where you can play guys. There's a difference between playing them and trusting them. And I don't know how many he trusts right now. And I think he eventually will. And as you mentioned, injuries and sicknesses have kind of played in with that as well. But he's got to find some trusting guys these next couple weeks, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, A game, Oregon, A game, Indiana, they can beat everyone, but can they win when they're having a C game? Can guys, find ways to the basket, make themselves useful when they're not shooting well? A kid like Hummerkaus, when he's not shooting it right now, he has not been very valuable. They have so many guys like that who are the Will Riley's, the 18 one day, the 0 the next. Can they find consistency? Because in the NCAA tournament, you have a bad day, you go home, and you got to be good. Twice to get to the Sweet 16, twice more to get to the Final Four, and bad games. Then it's over.
We're joined now by Jim Mattson, sports director down in Peoria, talking Illini athletics. And Jim, I want to open up to like a bigger conversation quickly with you. As of course in the Quad Cities, you got your Iowa fans, Illinois fans. Off the court with Iowa in Carver, and you've been up to Carver a ton.
Sure.
Seen you there, and there's been some great environments there, and then there's been some environments where when you're covering Illinois, there's a lot of orange. You go there and you watch Illinois yesterday, and I know winning helps, I get it, but it's always electric. And that's not, I'm not just picking on Iowa. You look at Minnesota some nights and some of these Big Ten teams some nights, it's not what it always used to be when you were growing up. I was growing up where you knew you were going to get a jam-packed arena and a student section, all that. I guess we'll start with what makes Illinois special. It's not just winning. They really seem dialed in to making the fan experience something special, especially with the students. What is it? It can't just be winning that makes Illinois special when it comes to a basketball environment, is it?
I think a lot of it's winning.
Okay.
I mean, when they had Gross there were a lot of empty seats and there was a lot of apathy, and the program was struggling. That's the one thing about Underwood is, people who criticize Underwood, I'm like, my gosh, remember where the program was. Illinois fans didn't tune in on Selection Sunday. They weren't getting picked. Illinois fans were playing in the play-in game in the Big Ten tournament. Illinois was not selling out. Illinois was not in these national TV, these big Duke game coming up next month. So I think winning has a lot to do with it. I think we're almost the flip of Iowa. Football, Illinois always looks at Iowa and says, God, how do they sell out every game at Iowa? And Illinois has tried to incorporate a lot of fan-friendly things to get people into the football stadium. Now Bielema's got them winning, and I'll be really curious if they can come close to sellouts every week next year in football. Yeah. But the fans are a little bit, they're much more fickle than they ever were in the past. I mean, here in Peoria, we're only 20 years removed from Bradley drawing 10,000 every night. Now Bradley leads the Valley in attendance at like 5,000. People just are spending their money in different ways and sitting in front of that, 80-inch TV. And you got to make it important for people to come out there. I mean, Caitlin Clark, right? Iowa women. You got to make it important for people to come out there. And Illinois played a lot of important games, but 3 minutes to go yesterday at State Farm Center, it was pretty empty.
Yeah, it was amazing to see that place constantly, and I've been down there. It's a really good environment. Yeah. Carver can be the same way. You mentioned a couple things. You're used to, I mean, when I grew up, it was, Iowa or Illinois played on Saturday and they played on Wednesday, and it was at 7:00 and all that kind of, and Iowa's playing a Friday night game tonight. What are you doing tonight? Are you running around to a million basketball games, right? So all of these families and kids and basketball fans are playing basketball themselves, so they can't make it. You mentioned Caitlin Clark at Iowa, because I think Iowa, really, you can't afford everything. If you're an Iowa fan, you can't sit there and say, I'll go to the girls on Tuesday and the guys on Wednesday. Right. So they've taken away a lot from it. There's also Fran apathy, and it's funny because you mentioned John Gross and where that programs came. I don't know if Iowa fans remember where they were before Fran. And so it goes back to the old Dr. Tom days where Iowa fans weren't content, so they got rid of Dr. Tom, and it got really, really bad. So it'll be intriguing. I just always wonder that, because I watched the State Farm Center last night, and it's always rocking. The crush, I think, is the main thing. Their students always seem invested. There are no shows at Iowa. They can't get these students to lock in.
That shocks me, by the way. I just, as I remember when I was a student, I just loved going to the games, and it just amazes me when students don't want to go to the games. But I've had nephews go to the University of Illinois and never go to a football game. They want to watch the SEC on TV, and it blows me away. But you got to even convince the students to come now.
It's wild. It's wild. Jim Mattson joining us right now. Illinois does get a good opportunity. You look at the schedule to stack some wins and get back on track. And I think they owe Northwestern one. It is in Champaign. I like Illinois on Sunday. But with that being said, can you talk to us about there is a rivalry there. I mean, I don't know here in the Quad Cities because it's always Iowa, Illinois, and we look at that rivalry. But Northwestern and Illinois, it's a good rivalry, and Northwestern has had success. Not so much down in Champaign, but they have had success in the series, including earlier this year.
Yeah, I think it's a big deal for Northwestern to play Illinois. I think Illinois, used to be the pesky little brother, but now it's the little brother that does beat them occasionally, and maybe more than occasionally. So I think there is kind of a, Northwestern calls themselves Chicago's Big Ten team. Illinois doesn't like that. There's some bad blood between the two schools in that respect, but the bottom line is the rivalry's gotten better because Chris Collins has made Northwestern better, and they have beaten Illinois, and they've been a little bit thorn in the side of Illinois, and they're going to come in and play like Maryland. They're going to play physical with Barnheiser and some of those guys, and whether they're illegal screens, Illinois fans always feel like Northwestern leads the Big Ten in illegal screens, but they're going to come in here and block and pull their guards and try to get open shots and rough it up, and we'll see how Illinois reacts. They sure didn't react well last night.
I think the last time Illinois lost at USC, I won a little money because I knew that Illinois was going to be pissed off when they went to Indiana. Don't you see that on Sunday? And I'm not telling people to gamble. That's not my point. My point is, I think especially if Tommy's healthy, this team gets back on track. And I guess we'll talk about Sunday, but then you look at it, they go to Nebraska. Nebraska's always grindy and tough with Hoiberg, but that's a winnable game as well. I guess starting on Sunday, don't you see this team responding the way Brad Underwood teams usually respond after maybe a disappointing loss?
Yes, I do. But again, if I had a nickel for everybody who told me Illinois was not going to lose a game until Duke prior to yesterday, and I kept saying, look out for Maryland. Look out for Maryland. Maryland's good. Yesterday you thought the Orange Crush is back. The students are back. Illinois is back at home. They're coming off a loss to Michigan State. There's no way they're going to lose by 21 to Maryland. So, again, it's so hard to predict because these are really young kids. It's not, again, we don't have the track record of the teams that are even Purdue last year. You just knew, Big Maple and Purdue was going to show up every night. I don't think there's a team like that in the Big Ten right now. Even Michigan State, I know they're sitting there with 0 losses, but I don't think there's a team where you could say, that team's for sure going to win the next 5 because I don't know who's playing at that level.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I want to talk about the women's team with you real quick. I know you have a busy Friday because I used to live that life, so I know you're getting ready to run around all over the place. But Shauna Green, I haven't talked to you since they beat Iowa in Champaign. Now, that's a different Iowa team than years past, but it's an impressive victory. I've known Shauna, got to talk to her, got to know her a little bit, a Clinton grad. She's doing good things with that program talent-wise. There's been some bumps in the road here and there, but that's an exciting program at Illinois. And another testament to what Josh Whitman's done with these coaches because Bielema, check. Underwood, check. It seems like Shauna Green's checking a lot of boxes as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean they beat Indiana and Iowa in back-to-back games, which is, been decades, for Illinois to compete with those two schools and to beat them. And Illinois is battling a lot of injuries this year, and their recruiting class for next year is probably the best in school history. So the program is certainly on the rise. Now she's, trying to get more attendance, more enthusiasm, more excitement. And I think that will build because they are fun to watch. They play kind of an up-tempo style. They're winning now. It's a shame they're not healthy because I think if they're healthy, they'd really, really be good this year. But they're definitely a team on the rise. And, I go back to Aaliyah Guyton, who's playing well for Iowa. That's a girl that grew up in Peoria. And I think she compared apples and oranges and said Iowa's way up here and Illinois is kind of down here. Well, if Illinois can raise that level, Illinois is an incredible state for basketball. I mean, you obviously know Kate Martin and Aaliyah Guyton and the kids you've stolen from Illinois to go to Iowa. You keep those kids in Illinois, you recruit some more players. I've always thought Illinois women's basketball was an absolute sleeping giant, and I think Shauna's waking it up.
You mentioned like because we've been talking a lot about her. I had Rob Brooks on the show on Monday, voice of the Iowa women on radio, and he mentioned her. And Jan Jensen has talked about who's that leader now, and she flat out says, hey, here's this freshman that's coming off an ACL that's not even back really going, or maybe behind the eight ball a little bit with his freshman season, and she's already getting rave reviews. I remember I had you send me video when she signed, and you said, you first person, you're going to love this one. She's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about when you realized that she was, for the Iowa fans listening, when you realized that she was going to be a pretty special talent, and she's got a lot of growth ahead of her as well?
Well, she reminds me a lot of her dad. A.J. Guyton was a Big Ten MVP at Indiana, and A.J. was just kind of a quiet assassin. He would just, at Peoria High at Indiana, he would just hit the big shot. He wanted the big shot. He wanted the big moment. Guyton was that way from her freshman year on in high school. She wanted the ball. She wanted the big shots. Her junior year, she led Peoria High to their best season ever, third place in state. But she is as competitive a girl as you'll ever see. I mean, she hates losing, and she loves winning more than anything. But she loves that I'm better than you, that I'm going to be the best player on the court, that I'm going to take over games. And she's just always had that killer instinct. Her mom was a great volleyball player. Her dad was an Indiana All-American NBA player. So she's got great genes. But man, she's driven. It doesn't surprise me at all that she's a leader, because she was always a leader in high school, leader by example, leader by, when the game's on the line, she wants the ball and she's going to make a play. And, she's still, barely over 13 months from ACL surgery. So I think the best is yet to come. I think she's going to be an absolute star for Iowa.
I can't let you go. Last one without talking a little bit of football. Obviously, everyone is still excited. We had Cole Rusk on our first week, efforting to have Luke Altmaier on the show next week. I know it's basketball season and people get into those sports, but they want to continue to roll that excitement when it comes to recruiting, transfers. And it seems like, as always, Brett does have this thing going in a great direction. But as always, he doesn't seem content. And I think that's the exciting part for Illinois football.
Absolutely. We've got a kid here in Peoria area, Dunlap. Coach Ferencz was over here yesterday at Dunlap High School recruiting a kid from Dunlap, and he's being recruited by Penn State, by North Carolina, by Alabama, all the schools. But those are the kids that Bielema needs to get. He needs to get the top tier Illinois kids. He's done a great job with Illinois kids, but the very top kids, the kid from Rock Island's playing for Notre Dame. The kids from Chicagoland are playing for Michigan. The J.J. McCarthy's, those type of kids. He's got to still get those top kids, but he's driven to get them. He's driven to say that 10 wins last year was not a fluke, and winning a big bowl game was not a fluke, and a final top 15 ranking or so was not a fluke. I mean, he's driven to take Illinois to levels we haven't seen in a long time. So it's exciting, and he's out there on the recruiting trail now, working really hard, and recruiting's picking up, and 18 starters back next year, quarterback back next year. I can't remember a January when Illinois fans were counting down the days to football more than right now. People are excited.
I saw the top 10 preseason ranking for Illinois football. I mean, it's been, and yeah. Jim, I'm not going to age you because you look fantastic, but it's been a minute since you've had a top 10 preseason ranking for Illinois football.
I can't remember one. I mean, I'm trying to think. I was a freshman in '83 when they went to the Rose Bowl. That came out of nowhere. Maybe the next year they were ranked in the top 10 because that was a young team that went to the Rose Bowl. They probably were, if I recall. But that's been 40 years. But they just, again, a little bit like basketball. You don't see the consistency of all these starters coming back. Notre Dame's got guys in the portal, starters. You don't see 18 starters coming back. Your edge rusher, your two defensive backs who are all conference here. Your quarterback who, Luke Altmaier sure had plenty of options to leave or go other places. So there's a ton of optimism. And again, Ohio State's coming to town October 11th, I think. So we'll see. Illinois got, they've got a big game against Indiana before that, but there's a chance that Ohio State game could be one of the biggest games in decades down in Champaign.
Yeah, we're keeping Illini fans happy. We have Matthew Bailey lined up for next week, efforting on Luke Altmaier.
What a great player, by the way.
Yeah, and we're trying. And Big Bert is busy. I've been talking with Brett Moore, who's fantastic, and we're gonna try to get Big Bert in here on sometime in
Excellent.
February as well. So, but when we don't have those guys, we are always happy to have Jim Mattson. I know you have a busy Friday. I'm gonna miss it a little bit. I got my son's sophomore game I got to get to, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm gonna watch as much high school basketball as I can, and I know you'll be working your butt off, and we'll talk to you here real soon. I appreciate you, Jim.
Hey, thanks so much, Matt.
All right. He is Jim Mattson. The Fighting Illini, a tough night last night, but I do believe they'll jump back on track coming up on Sunday. Well, coming up right here on the show, we'll talk some football. It's not often you get to talk to a Super Bowl champ and a good dude in the same breath. Jake Gervase will be joining us here on OTA on a Friday. Don't you dare go away.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air. It is Friday here in the Quad Cities. A big weekend of NFL football coming up. Two conference championship games, the AFC and NFC championship games, and it got me thinking, man, it's almost Super Bowl time. And man, I wish I knew a guy that won a Super Bowl. I do know a guy who won a Super Bowl. His name is Jake Gervase, and he's nice enough to join us now. Hey, Super Bowl champ. That's what you make me call you, is Mr. Super Bowl champion, isn't it?
Yeah, I just want to make sure before we get going, you got the mics on this time? Are we rolling? Yeah,
Wow.
We got all the technical stuff is squared away.
Hey, thank you for watching down in Texas. I appreciate you. I love it. I love it. How you been?
Good, man. Just living the dream down here in Austin, Texas. Now a father of two girls. Got a toddler going through the terrible twos. Ellis is killing it. And then about a 3-month-old named Andy Eileen. So adjusting to father of two and the girl dad role, and it's been good. Can't complain.
You've always, I feel like you've always looked up to me, and I got 4 kids. So is that the goal? Is it 4? Is it 6? You're a good Catholic boy. How are we doing this?
You got all boys, right?
Yeah, I'm just I'm too much man to have a girl, I guess.
I've actually heard it's the opposite. If you have girls, it shows you have high testosterone. So you, with having 4 girls,
Makes a lot
4
of
boys,
sense.
I think that's a sign of something you should maybe test your levels, because historically I've heard, like, if you look at guys in the NFL, a lot of them have a lot of girls, like Matthew Stafford, all daughters.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
And you check the box of all boys. So it really does add up. when you kind of look at that. But you should maybe check your levels next time you see your doctor.
That is a depressing thought to go into the weekend. I appreciate you bringing that up. How is being a girl dad? And honestly, all jokes aside, I mean, the reason I have 4 kids is because people would say like, hey, you going to try to have a girl? And I'd be like, we did. His name's Chase, or it's Carson. How is being a girl dad? And there's nothing like a little girl to get you wrapped around their little finger, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, she's at such a fun age where it's like 90% of the time she's the smartest, most fun, laughing, jumping around, happy. You get those tantrums, but like she loves to cuddle and snuggle, but she also likes to like wrestle on the couch and mess around. So she's at such a fun age. And then Andy's just showing a little personality. She's smiling and starting to giggle and stuff. So I love it. I say we're not going to stop until we have a son. Obviously, I don't make that decision. That will be up to my beautiful wife, Haley. But for now, it's great. After 2 kids, we still feel like we want to have more. I know that can change after each pregnancy or each addition to the family. But right now, we're enjoying the parents of 2. Being a girl dad's awesome. And, hopefully we'll try for baby number 3. Because at some point, I would love to join the club of having a son at some point down the line. So we'll see how things shake out.
And then eventually, obviously, you'll move back to Davenport and send these kids to Assumption, as 2 good Assumption grads would do. So we'll look forward to that. They'll be on the show someday. It'll be great.
Yeah, they'll be on the show. They're, I'll see if I can work my way up and coach Davenport Assumption football. Haley can go coach basketball. Well, we'll be on your show in person with the kids. It's all in the pipeline. Just give us some time. Got to take over the Austin real estate world first.
I love it. I love this time of year. It's conference championships, and you're not too far removed from those. What is this week like in the NFL, preparing for a conference championship and making that ticket, punching that ticket to a Super Bowl?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun when we made our run in 2021. I had played in a couple regular season games, not full time. We had some injuries. I ended up getting signed to the active roster like the week of the playoffs. In the first, for our playoff run out in LA. Week 1, we beat Arizona at home. Week 2, we went on the road. We were whooping the Bucs and Tom Brady. He came back in the 4th, ended up being like a tie game, being up like 28 points or something insane. Thought we were going to be like another Tom Brady story of a historic comeback and a choke on our end, but ended up winning that game. And then we had the Niners in the NFC Championship at home, which was basically an away game out in LA. Like all the Niners fans took over SoFi Stadium. It was probably 75-25% Niners fans compared to Rams fans. But leading up to that game, that was my 3rd year with LA, and we were 0-6 against the Niners in the regular season. We hadn't beat them in 3 years. They had our number, and we just knew like we were healthy, we were hot, kind of very similar to a couple teams in the playoff race right now. That we just knew we had a chance if we went on and played well, and it came down to the wire. It was a close game, and obviously at that point, like you're 1 win away from, getting to the Super Bowl and punching your ticket, and then from there anything can happen. So we were fortunate to be on the winning side of a tight game with the Niners in 2021 in that NFC Championship.
How and you look at that and you talk about being hot at the right time of the year. How important is that? I mean, I'm a Lions fan and an amazing season, 15-2, and they run into a buzzsaw and they're not playing this week. How important is timing in the NFL? Because it's not just talent. You can be playing right at the right time and all those kind of things, correct?
100%. It's getting hot. It's being lucky with injuries. Like your team was, banged up on defense and was missing X amount of starters. I think in November of 2021, we lost like 4 games in a row. So like we had a COVID outbreak and lost a bunch of guys that couldn't play in one game, lost that game, had some injuries. Starting in December, we started playing better football. I think you're seeing that now with like the Commanders. Like they're healthy, they're hot, they've got nothing to lose. new coach, young quarterback. I think it takes a lot of luck. If you talk to like any, it's weird to say I'm an NFL vet, but like if you talk to any like NFL veterans, like Andrew Whitworth, Stafford, any of those guys, they're going to talk about like healthy and momentum. And if you get that in the playoffs at the right time and you're peaking and playing good football, anything can happen. Like you said, the Vikings are 14-2, one win away from a bye and playing at home the entire playoffs. They lose to Detroit week 18. Then they got to go on the road and play a hot Rams team and get upset in the first round. And then same thing with your squad last week against the Commanders. It's about peaking at the right time. And I think right now the Bills, Commanders are probably my two teams I see kind of punching their ticket come this weekend.
You kind of took my next question, because besides taking over the Austin real estate empire and hanging out with those little girls, you got to be watching some football on a Sunday. What do you expect this weekend? And you kind of just talked about it, but those two teams are playing really good football right now, but Washington has to go on the road and all those kind of things. What do you see? And you kind of gave a little sneak peek, but what do you expect this weekend?
Yeah, I think starting with Bills, Kansas City, I think, Kansas City's interesting because they've won a bunch of one-possession games. Like their record, instead of 16 or 15-2, could have very easily been 12-5 or whatever, right? They won a bunch of those close games, which that can go two ways. They're championship level football because they find a way to win those games, or it's they got lucky and snuck by, right? So like I think they're interesting. Where the Bills, like I'm a big Josh Allen fan. He was my first collegiate start at Iowa when he was at Wyoming.
Yeah.
And like I remember watching him on tape, and like he was like kind of how I played. Obviously, way better quarterback, athlete, human, checks all the boxes. But like I remember watching him on tape, like he should go out of bounds after a first down, and he's like lowering his shoulder to pick up extra yards and taking hits he shouldn't have. And like that's how I tried to play in high school, and I was always a fan of him. And he's playing really well. They're kind of banged up as well. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup. I think he's just due to get that signature win against Mahomes. Like he hasn't had it. And I think that'll be interesting. So I pick Bills in that night game. And then I don't know. I think Commanders, Eagles is a toss-up. Depends on, some of the weather. They both played in cold weather games. Saquon's a freak, and he's running the ball well. And Hurts is just doing his job, not turning the ball over. Plus their defense is really good. So I think that one could be a toss-up too, just because you look at what the Commanders did to Detroit. Like, yeah, Detroit was banged up, but Washington's defense had 3 or 4, turnovers that turned into points that led to a hot offense, right? So I think I'd take back that pick. I'd probably go Eagles.
Okay.
Bills, Super Bowl is kind of my prediction.
No, I like it. You mentioned Assumption, so I got to ask you real quick, when you were playing quarterback at Assumption, how did you do against local teams here in the area, like in the Quad Cities or the MAC?
I think just one thing that stands out, just never lost to Bettendorf. That's one thing, that might be my favorite athletic feat of all time. That might win in the Wolf family. Three times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that would some would call that a three-peat.
Some would call it like a regular season dynasty. It maybe not a postseason. Like I never went to the Dome, but during the regular season from 11 to 13, the Davenport Assumption Knights, never won the MAC championship, but also never lost to Bettendorf.
I will leave that video for Pat Anger to respond to on Monday, which is funny because y'all didn't play against each other. It's just, because he's like way, way old, like a lot older than you are. You mentioned, the Lions, and I'm not going to talk a ton about that, but you see Laporta and you see your buddy Neiman and Jack Campbell on that team, and you see them all over the league. So it's not just the Lions, but are you a Rams guy? Are you a Rams fan? That's your thing. Obviously you won a Super Bowl with, or do you kind of look around the league and find out, hey, this guy's playing here Iowa wise and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. It's tricky. If the Rams are playing, I'm probably rooting for the Rams, unless they're playing against like one of my best friends, right? I would say nowadays
I don't play in the league. I don't play in the league, so they won't be playing against one of your best friends because I don't play in the.
Correct. But I've got more best friends than you.
Okay, just checking. Just checking. Go on. I'm sorry.
But I'm probably just a fan of like quality football, to be honest. Like, I don't have like a diehard team that I'm like sitting down and I'm watching every kickoff. We may talk about this, and we're going to discuss Iowa football. I actually haven't really been able to watch too much football this fall because anytime the TV was on, my toddler was demanding Miss Rachel, which is a YouTube educational series for toddlers.
So is this.
So like this fall, this is 100%. I'm going to have her watch this episode tonight.
Exactly.
Like she's going to study up on how to like bullshit with your buddies. So like honestly, like until the last like 3 or 4 weeks, she's kind of flipped a switch where she doesn't really care what's on the TV.
Okay.
So I've finally been able to dive into the college football playoffs and playoff football. So I'm a fan of I'll root for the Rams. I grew up a Bears fan. That's been a tough life being a fan for them. But I'm just a fan of quality football when it comes to the NFL and tuning in.
I know you just got into the college football playoffs, but it's a different system. And I guess just your thoughts of having 12 teams, having it played out on the field, not just picking 4 teams and maybe getting the right one. I mean, if you look at it, if they picked 4 teams this year, the national championship game would have never been in the postseason. Those are all 5 seeds or lower. Your thoughts on the new age of college football?
Yeah, I think the college football playoff is awesome. I love the expansion. More teams, the better. Make it like March Madness. It's got to be a grind on players because it's an additional 3 or 4 games or whatever it was, right? But I think the expansion is awesome. I think they, I didn't dive too deep into it, but I think they could do a better job with some of the strength of schedule and the seeding and who gets in and who gets out, right? Mm-hmm. Similar to how like the NFL is kind of talked about, or it's been thrown out that like, if you win your division, that shouldn't guarantee you a 1 through 4 seed, because like you saw with the Vikings, they were 14-3 and ended up being like a 6 seed or whatever it was. So I think they could work on the strength of schedule to decide which 12 teams get in, because I think there was probably 1 or 2 teams that may have lost another game, but they had a much harder strength of schedule and probably deserved to be in. So I think they could look at that. But I think the college football playoff in general, just the expansion, I mean, the more the better. Don't even get me started on NIL and the transfer portal. I think college football is an absolute mess right now.
That's my next question, because NIL, I'm not going to get you started, but you can go if you want to. What's your thoughts on the NIL stuff? And first, I guess, what's your thoughts on the NIL stuff? I got another one to follow up with, but just that era and transferring and national or name, image, and likeness, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for players being paid for the money and the revenue they bring to the university that they're playing for. Like, I think if you're a 5-star quarterback and you're going to be the #1 draft pick and they're selling your jersey with your name on it, you should make a percentage of that. I think they opened up a can of worms before it was ready, and now it's unleashed and you can't do anything about it. You combine that with the flexibility of the transfer portal. I could not imagine being a college coach right now, like trying to keep players on your team when they're getting poached from other programs offering more money, or trying to recruit a high school kid by guaranteeing X amount of money, or the defensive end for Florida demanding he plays on 3rd down and gets a $40,000 stipend. Otherwise, he's leaving. And thank God Florida said no, kick rocks, and now he's in the transfer portal. Yeah. But, like, that's just a nightmare. Like, when I was in college, you didn't have to deal with any of that. Like, yeah, it would have been sweet to have a Checkers sponsorship or a WQAD sponsorship, right? Like, I would have been raking in, like, $500 a month. Like, but that would have been awesome back then. But I just think now they opened up a can of worms it's just ugly, and it's hard for a coach to recruit. And like, that's why you saw Saban left. He's like, I'm getting the hell out of here. It's not worth it. And it's a whole different, it's politics, it's money, it's, it adds a whole different level. I think it's going to draw away from not only like the level of competition, like those 4-stars that were backups at Bama are now getting money somewhere else. Therefore, Bama's not going to steamroll. So it may even things out a little bit, but I just think it's taken away from like the purity of the game of football, which is kind of sad to see.
Yeah, actually, that's really well said. I'm surprised from you. But regulations, it's the Wild Wild West, man. Like it's amazing. I get the premise of it and the thoughts, and there's always good in everything, but there wasn't just well thought out. It was just kind of thrown out there, and now we got to go back through and fix a lot of things, and there's got to be some rules, some regulations, so it's not the Wild Wild West. I will mention, because of the Checkers love, and I'll brag a little bit, on Wednesday night, my freshman knocked down 5 threes in a basketball game.
Okay.
So I said, hey, what do you want to get on the way home? Man, there's something about Checkers at 9:30 on a Wednesday night that just hits, man. It just hits.
You're talking dirty to me right now. I get Checkers like once a year. So like you're just preaching like I miss it. Next time I'm home, it's on the bucket list. So
it's ridiculous because it's so bad, and that's why I look like I look. Just so you know, I'm eating Checkers on a Wednesday at 9:30. You mentioned the NIL and joked about like who would, but in all honesty, like who would have been Jake Gervase's NIL deal? And Checkers is a slam dunk, so you can't use that one because obviously you have connections. But is there a place in Iowa City or here that you'd be like, that's where Jake Gervase is going to get hooked up at?
No. I was a slow walk on that tricked his way into starting a couple of years, and I don't think so. You tell me. I mean, I don't even know. I know like that Iowa's got the swarms, like every player on the roster gets a percentage of what they bring in there, and then I see like dudes doing car commercials and bank commercials and stuff. I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. No, I don't even know how to answer your question.
When you talk about college football today and the way it is, and then you think back to who your head coach was and still is at the University of Iowa, are you surprised that Kirk hasn't done what Nick Saban and others done and just said, forget this? Because that's not what he's here to teach football and life. And I think he's done a good job of adapting to this craziness, but it's probably a little surprising, knowing the way you know him, that he has adapted the way he's adapted, I think.
Yeah, I think, Iowa's kind of a unicorn when it comes to the NIL situation, just because like we've never gotten those big 5-star, 4-star recruits, right? Like you might be an answer, but like when I was there, I think the one 5-star we had was AJ Epinesa, and like that was it, right? And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they got a couple more now, but I feel like they probably don't have to deal. Granted, they still have to think about it because they got to add value in recruiting, but they probably don't deal with the headaches that the Ohio State, the Alabama, those SEC schools, like some of the numbers I've heard about dudes here in Austin for UT are like insane.
I can't imagine.
Iowa doesn't necessarily have to deal with that as much. I'm sure they do here and there, but he's definitely had to find a way to pivot while remaining competitive. And I think that's just from experience and being around so long and, being such a smart football guy and a great person in general. I feel like he's done a good job of that. The program's done a good job of that. They'll have to keep growing and like being able to, because like you said, the can of worms is open. You can't close it and it's not going anywhere. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how they transition, and in terms of him just stepping away and not wanting to deal with it, I think that just shows like, he feels young, he's energetic, he wants to ride it out, and I don't know how many years he's got left. I couldn't tell you, but could be 1 year, could be 5, who knows? And time will tell. But I think Iowa's just in a unique position based off the type of players they recruit, them relying on in-state kids, them relying on walk-ons and find a way to develop, because they're still a developmental program, right? And that's something that probably helps them when it comes to NIL recruiting, transfer portal BS that is the world of college football now.
A few more for Jake Gervase, former Assumption 3-peat champion over Bettendorf, also former Hawkeye and former Super Bowl champion with the Los Angeles Rams. You're down in Texas. SEC country now, I guess. It was maybe when you got there it wasn't, but it is now. It's SEC country. What are they? Is it weird being down there as a Big Ten boy? Is the cult following to SEC football what we think is up here? And are you still a Big Ten guy, or have you kind of swayed to what the SEC kind of does?
No, I'm definitely still a Big Ten guy. Like, I'm rooting for it's Big Ten winning the last couple, last 2 years with Michigan last year, Ohio State. I don't love Ohio State, but I'm going to root for them over another conference just because it makes the Big Ten look good. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm rooting for Iowa, no matter who they're playing. And then like the cult following, like I don't think Austin is as crazy as like Texas A&M or some of these other schools, right? In the South, I think Austin is, as a city, is a really great place in football town without being like crazy about it. Like it kind of gives me a bigger version of Iowa City vibes in terms of campus and game day type environment. So yeah, I'm going to root for UT when they're playing, as long as they're not playing Iowa. So definitely still Big Ten, go Hawks, roll Hawks, all that good stuff. But yeah, it's been cool to be like, I'm starting to learn, I've trained some younger kids just on some speed and agility work. And definitely Texas football at a young age is a little bit different than, Rising Knights back in the day, right?
No.
Like no hate on Rising Knights, but it was pitch right, pitch left to your fastest kid and go score a touchdown. Like these kids are running like outside zone and like all these different run games and passing games. And it's Texas high school football, there's a reason Friday Night Lights was a TV show. And if I'm lucky enough to have a son that does want to play football, I can't wait to and let him enjoy that if that's something he wants to do down the line.
Oh God, I can't even think about little Jake Jr. running out trying to play football someplace. You're gonna be that dad. I unfortunately think you're gonna be that dad going crazy on the sideline. Before I let you go, so we mentioned, and all Hawkeye guys are Hawkeye guys, but Pat Anger, Quad City. I like the Quad City Hawkeyes because it's almost like a fraternity a little bit, and Pat is the voice of the Hawkeyes, I guess, and you've won with him because we are all champions of the Guy Randazzo Memorial Golf Outing. Although Pat tried to cheat, and you wouldn't even let him. You wouldn't even let him cheat. Like that's the beauty part of the whole thing is that it took the Assumption guy to give some morals to the Bettendorf guy in order to make sure we did it in the right way. But did you listen at all to anything Pat Angerer said, did on radio, or was that just like out of sight, out of mind type of stuff?
Well, like I said, the toddler made it a little difficult to watch the Hawks on Saturdays, but there was some times where I was able to tune in during nap time. I think Pat did a respectable job. I think he, found a way to check himself a little bit. We know Pat can be a little out of pocket every once in a while. Not that he's always a lying, cheating SOB, but I was a little bit nervous for Hawkeye fans to experience Pat Anger on live television, and I think he did a good job. So there's definitely room for improvement. I would love to someday get into the game day color broadcasting TV network, stardom that you guys have achieved. Jesus. But no, let's just say I was pleasantly surprised with my friend Pat. If I am back, hopefully you got to send me the date. Hopefully I can find a way to be back for, to defend my D3 championship. And if Pat tries to cheat, just know and trust I won't let it happen. So yeah.
We went way downhill last year. 2 years ago, we win the damn thing. We're rocking and rolling. We have Fick replace you this year, and it didn't go as well. So hopefully we can get you back. Before I let you go, do you miss it? Retired now. I'm retired now too. Look at us, a couple of guys in our prime, retired from things that we weren't really ever good at.
You chose to retire. I just essentially got fired and never got called back. So.
Yeah. Well,
that's brutal honesty.
Yeah, but with that being said, do you miss it? I know you just recently had a surgery, so body-wise and health-wise, that game takes a toll on you when you do it as long as y'all do it. What do you miss about it? And there's probably a few perks about not being in the game these days.
Yeah, I definitely do miss it. I think I miss the locker room first and foremost, just hang out with your guys, mess around in the locker room before practice, after practice. sitting in the meeting room waiting for the coach to come in. I think, it's a special thing, whether it's in high school, college, or with grown men, to be just hanging out and like being loose and having a good time, right? Like I don't really know. I'm sure at some point I don't really know where else I could find that now. So like that's something you definitely miss, and that's the number one thing most guys talk about. And then I'm just kind of a psycho in terms of like I miss like competing, whether that was practice or games. I think I've got a couple things I want to try to get into post football to kind of scratch that itch once I get healthy with this ankle that I had surgery on. But definitely miss it. The hard part of the transition's over. I think I was lucky enough during my transition, my forced upon transition where I wasn't sure if it was over, but it was probably over, and you're waiting on a phone call and still training, where I just had Ellis as a newborn baby. I was starting a business with my brother during the off season. So like I was lucky to like stay busy and like keep my hands moving, waiting for that phone call. And then when you decide it's officially over, it's like, okay, now what's next, right? So like I think that transition can be hard for a lot of guys. It was definitely hard for me. I'm through that hard part, and now just trying to hit the ground running with some things I got lined up next, both in terms of what I'm going to do for my day job and provide for my family, as well as scratching that competitive itch once I get healthy here in the next couple of months.
When Pat gets canceled next year, I think you do a great job. I really do. And I don't like saying nice things to you. So just wait for Pat to say something stupid, slide right in there. I'll slide in for Dolph. You slide in for Pat. Yeah. We'll take over the world.
It is only a matter of time. Like, Pat's going to mess it up. We're just waiting on it. So whenever it happens, throw my hat in the ring. I'd love to talk for the Hawks on Saturdays.
Awesome. June 14th, by the way, is the golf outing. You'll be getting a text about it real soon. I know you're a busy man. You'll find out, man, the more kids you have, the harder it is to come back and do the things that you want to do. But there will always be a spot on the greatest foursome to ever step on a golf course. Pat Angerer, Jake Gervase, Matt Randazzo, and the Silver Fox himself, Joe Conklin.
Hey, I mean, I'm glad you told me June 14th, because I got to have the Rally Freed football camp at some point. And now we know you got June 14th locked in. So
boom,
we will coordinate that accordingly. I'll make it a bang trip home.
Hey, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and thank you you watch every day. I know you do. You're down there and you're like, hey, girls, get to the TV, the YouTube, Dazzo's on. So I always appreciate you. I'll talk to you real soon. Thanks, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me on. See ya.
All right, he is Jake Gervase, former Super Bowl champion with the St. Louis Rams. We got much more to get to. It's OTA on a Friday. We will be right back.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air on a Friday here in the Quad Cities. Of course, it's another big weekend of football, and they're running few and far between. Of course, the conference championship games on Sunday, and then, of course, 2 weeks from that, the Super Bowl, which means gambling people, you only got a couple big days left of football to gamble on. And speaking of gambling, we bring in our gambling expert, the one and only Dan Tomlin. Last week, you were a recreational gambler. Now I'm just going with it, man. You are our gambling expert, an expert that did win us a little bit of money last week. It didn't look didn't look great from the outside looking in, but when you start dissecting things, anytime you're winning money, that means you're not losing money, correct?
Yeah, no, and I think that when you bet the style like we talked about last week, it leaves you a little bit of room for things don't exactly go your way or whatever, but you can come out ahead. So we had 5 total bets. We won 2 of them, but they were both for plus money, and so it more than covered our losses. You know, the long shot of Rams and Notre Dame was 12-1 for a reason. It was a long shot. Neither of them won. Heartbreaker for my Irish, but yeah, and obviously our other loser was the Lions. Heartbreaker.
That's the thing.
For you, of course.
I would have rather won the 2 bets that involved our teams and maybe lost a little money in the long run. But yeah, I mean, and obviously, I think one thing I want to point out to people is if you are tailing Tomlin, if you will, you got to make sure to we put the units there, or you put the units there for a reason. There's don't just do them all blindly, do them all the same, all those kind of things. There's reasons why long shots or quarter units, and then the ones we like a little closer to even juice might be worth a full unit. So I think that's important. And then there's factors. We did that earlier in the week, and full disclosure, no excuses, but we did it earlier in the week. I think we didn't know about you didn't know about the snow game being in Philadelphia, and that changes things. That bet had both running backs catching 3 passes, and the snow is going to change that.
Yeah, and you know, I think also Kyron fumbled right away, which takes a lot of the confidence away. I shouldn't say takes the confidence away, but Stafford really didn't look to check down to him at all. He only looked downfield, and kind of surprised me because you thought dump it off, get some yards, but that kind of goes into I think the Eagles are going to play for the Super Bowl. You know, I think the Commanders are a great story, but defensively, I think that they're going to run into a juggernaut here.
Yeah, and their defense last week, and no excuses as a Lions fan, but their defense, yes, they came up with takeaways, but I mean, I don't know if Philadelphia is going to have their wide receiver throwing the football. I doubt that. Yeah. And also, just some of those takeaways late in the game. The one late second quarter by Santrell, the cornerback from Michigan, was a nice play. But other than that, the Lions gave the ball. The Washington defense didn't stop the Lions. The Lions kind of stopped themselves, unfortunately, and that means a long off season for yours truly. And then you get my offensive coordinator, so now Bears fans are happy. It was a rough 72 hours for the Randazzo household. So we turned the page with the Detroit Lions and with Notre Dame. We also turned the page with gambling. But talk about what we are up as we move into the next week.
Yeah, so like you said, the gambling weekends for football are really, there's 2 left, and when you get to this point, the books are also very sharp because there's only 2 games to worry about, and there's only so many guys, and especially when you're talking Chiefs and Bills, these teams have played each other in these kind of big situations a lot. So the books are pretty sharp. There are
real quick, Danny.
Yeah.
Explain that. If anybody's watching that doesn't understand what sharp means, kind of explain what you're talking about.
So they're able to take, with a smaller number of teams, there's smaller markets to even bet on, so they can really narrow down and get right on that number for player props that make it really challenging. I think Saquon Barkley, unfortunately, we're not going to talk about it on the show because his rushing yards is 127 and a half. Ooh. And there's no value in that. You can go in there and bet it, and it's a coin flip.
Yep.
But there's no edge. You know,
makes perfect sense.
And so when you talk about being sharp, you look at a number, you think, oh man, Saquon Barkley is going to run all over these guys. Sure, 110 yards is a really good day, and it could carry him to the Super Bowl. You will lose your bet. Yeah. And that's an insane thing to think that 110, 120 yards won't be enough to win a coin flip bet. And so, when I look around, I look for value. I look for things that have high probabilities or have happened in the past. And then trying to kind of exploit those type of lines.
Absolutely.
And that are fun, Some things are square and just kind of like ho-hum. But sometimes you can find some really fun kind of angles.
And there's some friends of ours that just despise us being square, and they'll let us know via text charge. So we appreciate that as well. So, all right. So moving into this week, I know what is the order? Is it AFC second and NFC first? So then the NFC's first. I don't know what you got them down. Are we good going NFC first? Want to talk about that first?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure. Yeah.
All right. What do you got? You got 4 plays total. So I guess we'll start with that NFC Championship game. It is just an overall. It is Washington at Philadelphia. And last I saw, and I can pull some up on whatever, but last I saw it was game-wise -6 for
6.5.
And has that moved too much?
No. And I like that number, but we're going to stay off that. We're going to go to props because, again, I think that, the bookmakers kind of know what they're doing at this point with these 2 games. I think that the Eagles could probably win by that, but I also could see it being a 3-point game. I don't know. It's hard to say. Jaden Daniels is still a rookie.
Yeah.
And going into the link and Super Bowl on the line and a jacked up Eagles defense, I just the momentum meter is pinning towards the Eagles, and it's a divisional game. I mean, these guys know each other.
Yeah, and that Philadelphia defense, not making excuses for my Lions, fully healthy, ready to rock. It wasn't the defense that Lions defense shell of themselves with missing 4 or 5 starters. So I would agree. And I am a sucker for a pregame prop. So lay it on me, my friend.
Okay. So the one line that really sticks out to me, and I can't remember if I harped on it last week or not, because I've been telling everybody I know. I just don't think Jalen Hurts looks right. I think that he's got some injuries. Coming back from the concussion wasn't super smooth. And I just don't think that he has to throw the ball for them to win. I think that in the second half of these games, you're going to be looking at them just trying to take the air out of the ball, really leaning on Saquon. And I don't know if you know this, but he has not thrown for over 130 yards in either of those games. It was like 128 and 130.
Wow.
His over-under for passing yards is 175. So we're going to go under 175 on ESPN. It's plus 105, so we're getting a plus number, and we're going to play it for a unit. 128 and 130, and you have the best running back in the game. You don't mess that up.
Last week on my own, not on my own, it was a play from somebody, I don't know, but I did Hurts under completions was 17.5. And I think it ended up being 17 or 16, so it kind of got a little close. But you're right. Anyone thinks that this is the high-scoring, high-flying Eagles of old. It's simply not. So, okay, so 175 yards passing under for 1 unit. And look for it plus money. I mean, people shop around and stuff, but you said ESPN plus 105. Yeah. So don't look normal juice. Try to get some plus.
Odds. Yeah, so I look for best odds on these things. You'll see 179 is floating around on books, but the under on that's like 115. And why pay the juice if you can go to ESPN and go under 175 and get it for plus money?
All right, that's what we're doing.
And then our next play is going to be backup running backs. How exciting is that?
Well, that worked last week, my friend.
Dude, killed it. How we didn't take Justice Hill all yardage. I think he ended up with like 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Like that paid. And then I had another play that was Cook and Henry for 20 carries each, and they both ended up on like 17, but that was like 20-1, and it almost paid out.
Yeah.
So here's what we're gonna do. Again, this is kind of on the same thought line of like they're going to run the ball. Kenneth Gainwell 10 yards, Austin Eckler 15 yards. That's also on ESPN. Plus 150. We're gonna play it for a unit to win a unit and a half.
Okay, so say that again. Eckler's only 15 yards rushing.
So that's what we're doing to get plus money for Gainwell's 10.
Okay.
So that 15 is something like minus 600.
Okay.
But it's getting us into the plus money.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So Eckler plus over 15 yards and Gainwell over 10 yards. You put those two together. What book are you using for that one?
That's ESPN also.
ESPN.
Yeah.
And that gets you to what?
Plus 150.
Plus 150, and we're doing that for a unit, right?
Yep.
All right. I like that. I am a sucker for a pregame prop. And another thing too, do you have two for each before we keep moving?
Yeah.
Okay. So before another thing, and I don't know how you like and what you do live betting wise, but you also can feel a game out. I don't know if this game's the best game, but if you do get to a point where Washington's down, a couple scores, Austin Eckler receiving live is probably worth a look because they're down, prevent defenses, they're going to check down a lot, or find that guy that he's targeting a lot and try to add on. You can find some really easy, some really good value mid-game, late game.
So I have been huge on Eckler receptions all year, and they finally have kind of caught up. I think that his number is 4.5 for over/under receptions, 4.5 for the backup running back. So when you say the books are sharp, that's the kind of thing where you open it up and you're like, man, Eckler, I'm going to go on Randazzo's. We're going to say 4 and 5 receptions, plus 120, plus 330, and then you see 4.5 minus 114, and you're like, not touching it.
Well, and it's kind of similar to Justin Fields a few years ago. It was like you couldn't get that rushing yardage up high enough, and early on you were taking advantage, hammering it. Heck, another one, and that's just the books catching up. 2 years ago, Iowa first quarter unders. You used to be able to get 7.5 and get the under and get good juice, and it got to a point that it get to 7, get to 6.5. They catch up. There's a reason why Vegas makes a lot of money. So, all right, let's move on to the AFC. And I think just obviously football wise, all eyes are going to be on this game. It's that marquee matchup this weekend. But I also think gambling wise, it feels more intriguing. Am I right with that? It just seems like an easier game to gamble on.
Well, and we have a history, right? I mean, that the AFC Championship a few years ago, where the Chiefs get the ball with 13 seconds or whatever and get 60 yards and kick a field goal. There's a lot of drama. I don't know that I like a side here. I think it's going to be a shootout, and I think it's going to be passing, because the two best players on the field, just kind of like in the other game, Jaden Daniels, Saquon Barkley, the two best players on the field need to have the ball. Well, the two best players in this game are Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Pacheco's not a great running back. Chiefs' rush defense is pretty good. I don't know that the running game is what's going to get done for either team. I think we're going to see passes. So, first bet. The books are a little bit off here, and I'm not sure why. This is going to be on Bet365, so you got to be on the Iowa side. Josh Allen, 35 attempts and 40 attempts. We're going to put a half unit on each. Each of the last 3 times these two teams have met, he's gone over 40 attempts. The 35 is at plus 210, and the 40 is at plus 650. So we're going to go half a unit on both of those.
I don't hate that at all.
Yeah.
So also, when you do this bet, because you're going to be doing this bet, because why wouldn't you? It's on the most popular rising show in the Quad Cities with the most popular segment in the Quad Cities. So, but that's just great. So plus 650 for 40, and the history backs it up. Like it's not like, wow, that's unheard of. That would never happen. Well, it has happened. I mean, you have the past to kind of put back on, and you love the fact that you hit one. Now you're already plus, and now you're ready to rock and roll and make some money. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to make some money.
Yep. And so it's kind of a little more fun than playing an under in the first game and like things like that. But again, that first game, let's build our bankroll. Let's hopefully hit 2 1-unit plays, and then we can go in the night game and let our hair down. So the next one, real fun. This is also on 365.
Time for me to go to Costco this weekend, it looks like.
Yeah. So swinging to Costco.
Yep.
Keon Coleman, longest reception, 30, 40, and 50. We're going to go 0.2, 0.2, and 0.1. Okay, so that's a little more complicated here.
So, and you can figure out your units however you want to.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is what I do, but just to keep it simple, if a unit's $100, that means you're putting $20 on over 30, $20 on over 40, and $10 on over 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so people at home or in the car or wherever they're at watching this, what are you putting on? Not what are you putting on, but what are those? What are the
so 30
juices?
so 30 is plus 450, 40 is plus 1,000, and 50 is plus 1,650. Now again, this is longest reception. So what we're kind of looking at here is a bomb where he's going to cover all these. He's going to cover all these at once.
Absolutely.
So you get some single coverage, single safety. Not too high safeties. They're watching Josh Allen. They've got a spy, so they've only got one high, and he just beats his guy, and they throw it downfield for 50 yards, and then we just see it the window, because we just cashed 30, 40, 50
You're texting
once.
me high fives all around. It's gonna be great.
Here's the angle on that. Okay, so you've got, when you look at explosive plays given up, of the 4 teams remaining, the Chiefs have given up a ton through the air. And again, I think when you think about this game, they have to keep their eyes on Josh Allen. They're not going to be able to play 2 high safeties. Otherwise, they're going to get burned by Allen using his feet. He hasn't shown too much of a tendency to do that in the playoffs. But again, he also knows his Achilles heel is these dumb turnovers that he makes when he tries to do too much. So if you've noticed, he's kind of kept it simple. And I would imagine that that's kind of how the Chiefs play him, which is why he's had 40 pass attempts or more in each of the last 3 times they played. And then Keon Coleman has had their most plays over 50 yards this season. So,
man, I like both of them. I'm gonna have to go to Costco. And if you're, for that first bet, if you're looking at those 35 and 40 attempts, if you're watching it and Kansas City comes out and takes a 10-0 lead, a 14-0 lead, that's outstanding. That's outstanding.
Beautiful. That is beautiful.
You don't want them running the football in the second half. You want them playing from behind and having to play catch up, because that's, you're looking at 10 attempts, 15 attempts, almost 10 attempts in a series, 8 to 10 attempts in a drive. It's going to make you a lot of money. Lot of money.
And it's those last couple drives of the game, where like they're passing and getting out of bounds, and they're spiking the ball is also an attempt. So like, you get down there at the end and they're down and they need to stop the clock. You never know, that spike could be what tips over from 39 to 40.
You're rooting for Hail Marys. You're rooting for anything.
Yeah.
You're rooting that they got, like, it's an important thing. You want the Bills to have the ball with 2 minutes to go in the first half and throwing the football down the field and doing those kind of things. The one thing I was looking at, one thing I got into last year wasn't nearly as good this year. And I think the reason used to play a lot of first quarter unders, quick, You don't have to wait around and deal with games. You can sit there and watch 45 minutes and find out. And they were really good last year. I do think that the new kickoff rule kind of messes with that, because when teams are starting at the 30 and you have a competent kicker in the NFL, you're 30 yards away from at least getting a field goal. But I'm kind of curious about the first quarter under for and I won't make it I'm not messing with your plays, because your plays are what we're at, but I was curious what they were for, and it is 9.5. So intriguing with that one. It's tough to sit there and say, I want to take an under on a team that just put up 45 points last week, but it's a different defense.
Yeah.
It's indoor versus outdoor. You're outdoors again. I don't know if at some point, and it's not being a Commanders hater, because it's going to annoy the crap out of me when Philly cruises and wins, but, the wheels have to fall off eventually. And in the flip side of that, the Eagles aren't explosive. If they get the football, so I'm intrigued. But here's the thing with that: 9.5 and 7.5 are the same damn thing. Like 9.5. I mean, because you're either looking at 7 or 10. So if you can be in a book where I think Fanatics is like this, maybe Bet365 is like this, where you can take an alt of 10 or over, you're going to pay the juice. But that's something while I'm at Costco, I might take a look at on Bet365 if I can get maybe under 10.5 first quarter for that game. Would not want any part of it in the second game at all, especially with the overs. And you're right, Dan, you kind of talk about it. It is more fun to bet overs. I mean, I don't know if it's more winning is fun. So that's the important thing. But as a viewer, like I do a lot of unders in college basketball, unders in NBA with stats, and it's not fun watching people and hope I don't want to say hope they get hurt, but hope they tweak an ankle, if that makes any sense. So more fun in the AFC game.
Like there's lots of ways in the NBA to hit unders, because games get blown out, guys get injured, you don't know, guys get sick. So NBA unders are a great play, but I think that, we all like to see an over here.
There's nothing better than having an NBA under and watching that said player get ejected in the second quarter.
Oh yeah.
And you're just like, bring it on home. So, all right. So let's recap them for everyone at home. The millions and millions that are tailing Tomlin this week. It is Jalen Hurts, under 175 yards passing. We're playing that for unit. You can get plus money for that at ESPN. So yes, the 179 is out there for minus 115. 4 yards. If it's 176, 177, 178, that's unlucky. I would do the plus money as well. Other play in the NFC is Kenneth Gainwell over 10 yards rushing and Austin Eckler over 15 yards rushing. We're combining those two. So when you go to look and you see Eckler's minus 600, it's just to getting us a little more juice. ESPN, you can put those together, plus 150. That's for another unit. And then the AFC, boy, we want a shootout. At Bet365, we're going to go a half a unit on over 35 passing attempts for Josh Allen and over 40 passing attempts for Josh Allen. One of them is plus 210. The other one is plus 650. Both of those for a half unit, right, Dan?
Yep.
Both of those for a half unit. And then last but not least on Bet365, Keon Coleman, longest reception, over 30, over 40, and over 50. We're playing all three. We're putting 0.2 of a unit on 30, 0.2 of a unit, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? On over 40, and then just 1/10 of a unit or 0.10 on plus or over 50. That one plays plus 1650 on Bet365. Any other advice to gamblers, even the live bettors out there, as we get ready for a day packed full of football?
Yeah, I mean, just keep your units in mind. Don't get too crazy. And the same thing we'll say for the Super Bowl, because again, that it's like the stock market. It corrects to where the public takes it. So there's two games that everybody's focused on. You alluded to those live lines. I mean, when you get into like the nuts and bolts of how these sports books work, they've got a whole week to set the line for these games. They're going to have a whole 2 weeks to set the lines and let the market kind of come together for those lines. Those live betting, they're kind of taking a stab and they're gambling along with you. One guy that I love to bet live, here's a quick one. Noah Gray. Noah Gray's line always opens at like 19.5. And if they don't throw to him on the first drive, it's immediately 11.5.
Okay.
And his average reception is something like 10 or 12. I love betting Noah Gray live. So that's just something to keep in your back pocket.
How about,
like
what
I
do you
said,
think?
because it's kind of just all algorithmic and it doesn't really play into what the game script is.
I'm going to give you a little bit of homework, Mr. Tomlin. Let's do something early next week, and let's try to get on some of those Super Bowl plays before the market maybe corrects itself. A lot of times I know during Super Bowl week, if you jump on stuff early on, you can get some value in which it changes it so much in 2 weeks, they can almost middle and try to find a happy median in which you can find a nice double up win or be safe on each side. A lot of things we can talk about and get to the next couple of weeks. Boy, I was thinking one other thing when you're talking about live, slipped my mind. But anyways, 4 more bets for you. We're gonna use we got a budget for the show. So Dan Tomlin's either gonna make the show a whole bunch of money or he's gonna make the whole show. But you know what? We're having fun either way, and we're winning either way. So plug how they can get your plays and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of free posting too at Dan Tomlin Bets on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. All one word, Dan Tomlin Bets. I post stuff almost every day for NBA, and then I'll have a few more NFL plays on there too.
And also, bet responsibly. That's why we have always these units on there. This is recreational gambling. All those kind of things. Oh, here's what I was going to tell you. I'll tell you a little story, and then we'll talk about more of this in the Super Bowl. I have a brilliant, smart, beautiful wife, but she's awful at picking heads and tails for the Super Bowl. It's to a point now where I have buddies that text me the day of the Super Bowl to find out what she actually decided to do so they can actually do the opposite and win some money. I believe she's won one time in 17 years of doing heads versus tails. So and it's hard to do when it's a 50-50 proposition.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about that. I would be worried that she would be offended that I'm making fun of her on the show, but she doesn't watch this crap. So come on, like we're safe. We're in a safe zone. So anyways, he is Dan Tomlin. Follow him at say it again, Dan Tomlin Bets on X as well. And we'll keep these up throughout the weekend. We'll keep updated on both social medias how we are doing. Bet responsibly, win some money, and Tail Tomlin. I don't know if that's the name of the segment, but we're going to start working on a fun name for the segment as well. So, Danny, as always, I appreciate you. Best of luck this weekend.
Absolutely. Good luck, guys.
All right. That is it for our gambling segment of the show, but we still have more to get to. You're watching OTA on a Friday. We will be right back.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love, and the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air on a Friday. A fun show so far. Really great to catch up with Jake Gervase. Of course, Jake down in Texas, former Super Bowl champion with the Rams, and heck of a story from him. An Assumption standout, played great there, walked on at Iowa, earned that scholarship, earned that starting role, went to the NFL, had to earn his way through practice squad after practice squad to make the regular roster and eventually win a Super Bowl. We wish him and his growing family the best of luck. We'll catch up with him again in the near future. So if you missed Jake Gervase earlier in the show, you can go check him out right now. Also, want to thank Jim Mattson, a legend in the state of Illinois. Jim, all over the Illini beat. If there's someone who knows more about fighting Illini sports, I'd love to meet him, because Jim Mattson, as good as it gets, of course, the Illini, with a disappointing loss at home yesterday, last night to Maryland, losing by 21 points. Of course, some illnesses, some injuries have been biting the Illini, but right now they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. A very talented basketball team, but one that's going to have to gel and get back on track as we get ready to hit February and we get ready to hit March Madness, of course, coming up right around the corner. So Illinois back in action on Sunday. They will host they will host Northwestern. Expect Illinois to get back on track on Sunday. Intrigued by a line in that one. We just got done talking about gambling. I'll be intrigued on a line in that one. Of course, in the state of Illinois, you can't gamble on the college teams in Illinois, so might be a trip across the river, because I do like the Illini coming up on Sunday. Check out Jim Mattson, his entire interview, if you missed that early in the show as well. And then also we just got done with Dan Tomlin. A lot of fun talking sports gambling with him. Some great plays. There's 4 of them. If you missed them, we'll post them on our social media after the show, but you can go back and listen to that interview as well. Of course, if you're watching us live on YouTube, we thank you. Thank you for subscribing. If you have already, if you haven't, please do so. Spread the word. Over 600 subscribers so far, and we're just getting rocking and rolling on this thing. Hopefully, we continue to grow this over the weeks and months ahead. Also, the entire show, all of our shows are on all the podcasting platforms, including this week getting up on Apple Podcasts. That has helped us out. Hopefully that helps you out as well. So go check out all the shows from this past week. We've had a lot of fun. Of course, yesterday on the show, we had Owen Freeman. You can check out that entire interview as you get ready for the Iowa-Penn State coming up tonight. That game around 8 o'clock at Carver Hawkeye Arena. So check that out as well. Also, we had Alex Johnson on yesterday. Sherrod Rock Ridge played tonight as well. So if you want to get yourself ready for a big high school basketball game, do that. And also on yesterday's show, Jake Brennan talked a lot about the Cyclones. So that shows up there. Guests this week include Dan Burrich. We're going to continue to do our Wild Man Wednesdays. Rob Brooks joined us earlier in the week. Mark Nessler was in-house. Tom Kaker was in-house as well, along with John Marks. A lot of high school coaches this week. Sean Taylor, after win number 700. We talked to Mark Polite and Ron O'Brien as well. So a lot of great content on the YouTube channel and also on the podcasting platform. So check out some of the shows from earlier this week. We are excited about next week as well, tracking and working on some interviews for next week and the weeks ahead. Of course, Charles Jugasol and Notre Dame finished national runner-up on Monday. Efforting to get Charles will probably be not next week, but the week after that, we will get Charles and talk to him all about a fantastic couple games in the postseason after dealing with an injury to start the season. Also, tracking down Logan Lee as well. He just finished up his rookie season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll have Trenton Wallace on next week. Trenton going down to Florida this week for extended spring training. He made it all the way up to AAA last year, so the former Assumption standout and the former Big Ten Pitcher of the Year in Iowa, having a great career in the minor leagues. We'll catch up with Trenton Wallace. We'll also catch up with a good friend of ours, a trick shot quarterback at Monmouth College, but also played several years in the NFL and is now a coach in the NFL. I believe he's with Indianapolis as we speak. Alex Tanny. We'll catch up with Alex Tanny coming up next week as well. And also next week, eventually, sometime, some way, Pat Anger will be making his return. We'll have his Angerer moments. But Pat spent the the week in Jamaica. So we'll talk to Pat about Jamaica and everything else next week. So a lot more to get to next week on the show. Happy and excited to finish up week 3 now of this podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us and helping it grow here in the Quad Cities. As I mentioned, if you get the chance, tell a friend, 2 or 10, get them subscribing and joining as well. We got a lot of content to get to. 2 hours each and every day of local sports right here in the Quad Cities. That'll do it for our Friday edition of Off the Air with Matt Randazzo. Again, next week, a full week of shows. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the conference championship games. Enjoy the college basketball, all the high school basketball out there. We will, I guarantee you, have plenty to talk about coming up on Monday morning. Have a great weekend, Quad Cities.